informal talk here. The idea is to give you guys a little background on what I've been doing. Okay, there we go. And to maybe provide some lessons learned along the way. I actually was involved both in academia and in small businesses in the medical device space. So I kind of been in the trenches on both sides. That's why both sides of the fence. And so I wanted to give you my perspective on things. So first off, I'm actually a UCSD alum. I'm a BE alum here at UCSD a while back. I got my PhD in BME at UCLA. And I actually ran this center at UCLA called CASIT, which is in the surgical, kind of the medical school. A lot of surgeons are working in there. The idea was to bring together engineers and scientists and clinicians and have them work together to solve problems that clinicians actually have in their daily practice. And so that was focusing primarily on battlefield medicine back at the time of the Iraq War R&D funding days. So a lot of medical imaging, kind of patients, surgical devices, implantable devices were being developed. I also left UCLA, started my own little medical device incubator for a while, and then I also spent a lot of time working on different scientific panels to understand kind of what's going on in the different clinical disciplines, different technical areas with NASA and NSF. And I since have jumped ship to actually take a look at a couple of different companies and try to get some products in the market. So that's kind of where I've been. And just giving you guys a quick overview on some things I've been working on, so you guys may have some questions for kind of how we got these projects started, or how we found the needs for the projects and so on. I did a lot of work in patient monitoring, like for asthma and fever monitoring. Developed some products in the surgical devices space, kind of like for anesthesia, for laparoscopic surgery, something also for transurethral imaging as well. A little bit of time I spent working on rehab medicine as well, and some wearable devices, point-of-care imaging devices, primarily ultrasound devices, biophotonics, and then digital health. So kind of all over the map in terms of patient monitoring and imaging and sensing type devices. So a lot of these are pretty expensive, challenging devices to have to put together. So a lot of these things were, took obviously a while to put in place and get all the pieces together. So we can come back to this later on, but so I kind of wanted to give you my thoughts, kind of working in the academic incubator environment and then working in the private incubator environment, since I did both. And like I said, I worked at CASIT, which was the cross-disciplinary hub, where we had engineers working 5 minutes up the street from the clinicians in the medical school, which put us all in the same kind of environment, and we easy to work together, which was huge to be able to get projects started. Did a lot of work with the schools I mentioned before, and we had a lot of large teams, with multiple graduate students, postdocs, 1 or 2 MDs, a couple of professors in the engineering side of things, some science people as well. And so really, by being very inclusive and building big teams, it helped to be able to really get a lot of the different pieces together and solve a lot of the problems and not leave a lot of the pitfalls behind along the way. So it was a great experience and a great way to kind of get new projects off the ground by just having people together and having them talk without them having to walk very far to do it. Frankly, just walking is a major impediment to collaborating. And then I had this private incubator where we did a lot of work with patient monitoring, digital health, medical imaging, and this was primarily funded using contracts and grants. So I got really good in academia writing grants and getting grant funding. We raised like $25 million when I was at UCLA on stuff that I was involved in, and then I was able to raise, I think, 15 different SBIRs to be able to get these projects started in the incubator. So I was able to get I was able to build teams with clinicians or small businesses or different academic groups, and then we were able to kind of flesh the idea out, talk to our industry people, different connections, and then we wrote some grants, and we were able to really get the idea fleshed out enough to be able to raise funding to bring in the phase 1, phase 2 money to be able to get these things moving pretty fast. Although, okay, fast is the wrong word to use because it takes forever, and grants take 6 months to a year to get, and you keep on firing them off over and over again. So if you're patient, this can work really well. If you're impatient, it won't. So we then spun off a few companies off of this incubator, which would sort of take the ideas moving forward, because this is kind of more of like a shell to be able to get things started and have people work together and generate ideas in the early stage. So with all that in mind, the lessons learned in the academic environment was that things move really, really slow. And so I think I had around 40 graduate students working with me over the course of 6 years when I was at UCLA, and they're all working towards a master's or a PhD, and that's great. But the graduate student pace isn't aligned very well with getting a product to the market, because they need to have certain goals, to be able to graduate, whereas those might not be the same goals that you want to have to get the product moving forward, right? So obviously, there's a little bit of misalignment there. As you guys probably know, you can do really well in academia making a thing work once. You publish a paper, get a lot of fame from publishing papers, but it doesn't really still have that much relevance to getting anything moving forward in terms of a product, right? So, and also one thing I learned the hard way was that I tried to draw a line between what I was doing kind of on the outside while I was in academia. I was kind of part-time for a lot of academia and part-time in my business. And, I was very careful to separate things out, draw lines and be sure I wasn't breaking any rules. But then I wasn't using UCLA at all for what it's actually good for, which is taking on a risk in filing patents, having students work on things, and be able to get a lot of kind of honestly sort of cheap labor and collaborations that are much more easy to be able to build by sort of being on the inside in academia than being on the outside in industry. So there's a lot of benefit to leveraging what the university has to offer and using that to be able to take a lot of the risk on. And then sure, you've got to pay them later on for royalties and so on, but I mean, overall the risk in medical device R&D is so high that one in how many devices actually make it to the market, right? So you're probably better off having them take some risk on as well, since they have bigger pockets than you do. So those are a few points I want to make about the academic incubator model. In the small business incubator model, you'll find out pretty fast that developing the actual product is a very small portion of the actual effort. People that are engineers often think that they build something, make it work. Here it is. Hey, GE, here's my device. Let's go. Why don't you guys go and take this thing off my desk? But yeah, in reality, a company like GE often wants your product de-risked as much as possible, meaning having FDA clearance, of course, or approval, having the product actually meet the specs of what like a GE type company would want, and having some kind of like initial sales as well. One example that I have is one of our products, which actually was with GE. They wanted us to first get on the market, start selling it, and then they would, if that proved to be viable selling the product on our own, they would then take it on and then white label it for us for 2 years. And then once they proved the business concept with that product after 2 years, they would then consider acquiring it from us. So this is kind of you might have some better thoughts over there from Medtronic. That's definitely pretty common to have everything totally de-risked before really even really be seriously interested in acquisitions. And I'm sure you've all heard before that the leadership team in chemistry is by far more important than the technology itself. one thing we found is that when you have a lot of different ideas that are going on in parallel, you gotta have people that are dedicated to working on these different products, right? And so if you have, 4 guys working on 20 things at the same time, you want to have somebody who's really invested in each individual product idea and putting a lot of time into it, and then getting all these different, pitfalls sort of crossed off the list, or else you're going to have pitfalls that are totally exposed. So having a strong team built around each different product is of critical importance to be able to have that thing actually move forward with the right, right level of care to be able to make sure that it actually gets somewhere. And you guys probably know, you can learn all you want about medical devices and startups in class, but the best way to do it actually is to do it yourself and just dive in and take the risk. And so that's when you get the most valuable lessons by far. Some hard lessons, some great lessons, but that's kind of the way that I learned at least. And it's been pretty fun, but pretty difficult at times as well. So, and then this class, I'm sure, is harping all over this first point over here. Don't even bother without having an unmet need that's actually validated by more than one, not just one clinician. You got to have a team of people with different backgrounds that not a team, but people that you run this idea past with different backgrounds within the space. So like you want to talk to, for example, anesthesiologists who work in community clinics and the ones that work in the academic hospitals, and you want to have a pretty broad variety of opinions because one person often has a kind of a biased view on things or kind of a skewed view on things, and so that could really skew your entire, all your market requirements in your product. Of critical importance is to have a clinician who actually cares and who actually does stuff, because I've worked with a lot of clinicians in the past who sound enthusiastic at the beginning, they have a lot of good ideas, they kind of get involved in the project, and they kind of just they're all busy working working many hours on their day job, obviously, but like having somebody who actually is involved in helping you write things and go to meetings and test the device themselves, do actual stuff themselves, it's pretty rare to find those people. If you can find them, you're golden, because that's actually I think one of the most important things in a product is having that person involved.
Can I actually add to that? So that's actually what we want you to be doing over time, is developing relationships with these different physicians that you see. So it is important to think not, oh, this is just a question here, a question there, but this could be someone who is kind of your champion, or who is the doer that you would work with. So just make sure you have that mindset and you do whatever you can to build a good relationship.
Yeah, and often, a question?
Just to challenge that, a bit, there are some things we've been doing here in the clinical immersions, and there are things that you foresee as an engineer that would help a clinician do what they're doing better or change completely what they're doing. And the general take I've noticed, especially from those who are, say, very high up the hierarchy or are very good experts in their field, they seem to discredit anything because they've already got so good at it that they feel anything that's below is not useful. But then when you talk to the fellows or those who are training, they say, oh yeah, I think that's useful. So how would you? Yeah,
exactly. My best results have actually been with the younger, earlier stage clinicians, MDs or whoever, that haven't been around that long, who are kind of more open to new things. And so, I have a brother who's a pulmonologist, and he's the most stubborn, narrow-minded person in terms of new ideas you could possibly imagine. The worst person to have as a partner of mine in something. I would never bring him on board one of my projects. But there's and probably more than half of them are like that, right? They're all busy doing their things. They're all pretty much beaten down by the daily grind, right? But the ones that are younger, fellows and even residents, often have a lot more fresh ideas and can kind of challenge the status quo more. And get them on board, you can also kind of get on board early on and sort of keep on contributing in a company and have more flexibility in a lot of ways as well. You want to have your sort of KOL people as well be able to have credibility, add more weight to what you're doing. But in terms of actually doing stuff, the younger people typically are by far better than the old farts, I guess, right? So, advisors, you know, you want to have people that are going to challenge you and that aren't going to just, you know, rubber stamp what you're doing. You want to have people that have been there before, who have been in the trenches, who have experienced, you know, FDA filings and you know, audits and you know, who know about actually like practical matters around IP and you know, partnerships and those kinds of things. I mean, it's definitely critical to have people that really have been in the process. And you know, I've been part of a lot of teams. I'm a collaborative type guy, and I'm kind of the guy who always does everything, fortunately, and doesn't get much credit for it. But you know, it's always good to try to figure out who's not going to do anything and get rid of them as fast as possible, because there are always people that are kind of leeches who sort of hang on, and you got to negotiate about your, like, you know, your equity or whatever later on, and like this gets hairier the more time you spend waiting, and you want those people out of the room as fast as possible and get the people that are actually doers involved in the process. So, and one last slide I have for you guys. I was asked here to sort of think about unmet needs. That's kind of what we're working on right now. If I had some unmet needs that I wasn't working on already, I would take it myself. So I don't really have many to hand out. But I can tell you guys that the best way, in my experience, to find new unmet needs, you know, has been to talk to end users, of course, talk to MDs and clinicians. Like I mentioned before, you know, you want to find the glass half full type MDs who are kind of younger and more techie in general to get, you know, ideas from them. I actually had better results with like CRNAs, you know, the nurse anesthetists, who they work in several different departments in hospitals and know everything. They know about, you know, practical issues related to, like, you know, plugging in the monitor, or, you know, like getting the medication for this thing, or, you know, like they have a much broader experience base than MDs do. MDs are kind of more narrow in their own field. These people are educated. They're, you know, they're respected in their, you know, in their little worlds over there, and they know a lot about what actually goes on. A lot of the nurses, the RNs, I've kind of had mixed results. The RNs kind of, some of them know a lot, some of them kind of give bad information, so it's kind of a crapshoot with them. Of course, customers, obviously, you want to talk to the hospital admin people if possible. It's kind of hard to get them really engaged. Purchasing people, insurance people, but, you know, ideally you want to talk to them as well. And one of my little tricks is looking at kind of what's out there in terms of like the funding calls, because the NIH funds very early stage R&D, which is often going to be commercialized in, I don't know, 3, 4, or 5 years in the future. And so you can kind of see where the money is going, and you can at least sort of figure out based on that if this area is going to be hot or not. And these things are out all the time. There's new RFAs in DoD and NIH for all kinds of medical technologies that are, you know, that are needed based on their discussions with stakeholders in various areas in the kind of healthcare world. So that's my little spiel. Any questions? Yes.
Got one. What has been a good guiding inspiration or guiding framework for your work in this space? Is there an author or a book or a line of thinking?
I mean, the best book for me, honestly, is the By Design book. That one, I've been through a lot of. One problem in the medical device world is that you have a lot of conferences you go to and a lot of different books you read and lectures you listen to that are kind of broadly covering like everything from, you know, biotech to like IVDs to devices, digital health, kind of the whole spectrum. And there's not much that actually focuses primarily on like devices. And that book actually does a really good job covering the whole process, you know, in that kind of narrower field. Other authors. everything. There's a book over here by this guy. You can try that one out.
So that'd be good.
Yeah, I don't know. I think just getting a lot of opinions from different people in the space is the best thing you can do. There's some, go to some of the cheaper medical device conferences. There's that one Biocom thing we were with that recently, Biocom Device Fest, which kind of has some pretty somewhat focused topics on medical device, digital health related issues. But I try to avoid the big things like the big bio conference and the big ones that are more broadly covering like everything. That's kind of useless for getting kind of practical, real knowledge.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because something we're going to try to do actually on the same place where we have the clinical immersion scheduled, we're going to have a tab for upcoming events in the San Diego area. So that way, if one of you sees something through your network, you can just, hey, post the event. This is something medtech, entrepreneurship, digital health related. And then, we can probably look at some of the conferences that we've been to or I've been to in the past to also post things up for.
Go to MDM
Thanks,
West.
coming up.
You guys have been to MDM West, Medical Device Manufacturing. It's every February in Anaheim. It's free. It's like the whole center is this gigantic floor of like every possible medical device you can imagine. And they have companies that are offering services for like PCB fabrication and like catheter molding, like you name it. And you get to see like everything out there. You talk to people about the challenges or kind of what's coming up in these different areas. You can spend 2 days walking the floor talking to people. So it's a very good venue for kind of seeing what's out there. It's kind of more like on the device manufacturing side of things, but it's pretty interesting. So.
When you're trying to look for unmet needs, if you're on the prowl searching, do you prefer to try to go broad and hit a lot of different areas, or just try to learn everything you can about one field to feel like?
Yeah. So first off, I kind of things kind of just sort of came to me. I don't really go searching for for things, but yeah, I've kind of been very broadly. I've been working on a bunch of different things, maybe to my detriment. I don't know. So it's kind of a choice if you want to focus on one area, like if you want to work on you want to work on MRI or something, or you want to focus on one area, or if you want to go broadly. It's kind of a either way you can. The benefit of working in many different fields that you get to. As the funding winds change and like sort of priorities change, you can kind of go with them, which is what I've done. However, if you focus on one or two things, you can probably maybe you can move faster on getting one product to the market faster and focusing all your energy on that and putting all your eggs in one basket, which might not be good either. But yes.
When you're developing a medical device, and say you've identified the unmet need, you've got some prototypes going, at what point do you decide to now start talking to VCs? Is it when you do ex vivo trials or in vivo or?
So, Gary might have a different answer than I do, but what I was doing, which were primarily like imaging and monitoring devices, VCs are not going to be interested at all until you've gotten, you've built a team around something and you have something, clinically validated in a basic way at least. And so, I would say that you can attract angel funding earlier, but for VCs, in my experience, it's more once you've kind of got some basic clinical validation, which is expensive to get there in the first place. So if you're doing like a class 3 device, it'll take you forever. Class 2s, you can probably get out a lot more basic levels of data that are acceptable for VCs.
When do VCs come in?
Yeah.
So when do the venture capitalists come in? So VCs, they typically have much larger funds on the order of $200 million. So they need to put $5 to $10 million or more to work on investment. So they're not going to come in when you have a prototype, right? So it's typically, from what I've experienced, is when you fund like a clinical study, is you may need a VC round for that.
But isn't that like a chicken and egg situation? Because
Yes.
to get to the
Yeah.
critical stage, you
It is. And I mean,
The whole problem is that it's pretty hard to get the money, so you can get funding for like early stage R&D pretty easily, somewhat easily. Getting that kind of value of cover between that stage and VC funding is hard. And so, angels are like your best bet, but like getting that like couple $100,000 infusion of cash or maybe $1 million is pretty hard. If you ask for $5 million, getting below $5 million is pretty hard to actually to come by.
I would agree.
Would you rather seek that path or go for SCIR and try and
Everything, all the above. When you work on grants, kind of forces your team to get serious and to think through all the problems and the projects. It's actually a good exercise. Even if you fail at getting funding, it still forces you to kind of get serious and get everything figured out, get the whole team thinking, kind of on the same page, getting a clear message written out, getting an R&D plan fleshed out, and then that gets you to be stronger in kind of your next path of work that you're working on. It also might expose some holes, which could, tell you to shut it down faster because maybe it's a bad idea because you figured out that there are these major gaps in your thinking that are exposed either by yourself along the way or by the panel itself who's reviewing the grant. I kind of use the panel sometimes to actually help me, in the past a little bit, to kind of help with the vetting because I've fired off some grants that were basically garbage, and I found this out by some comments that were made by the panelists.
And just to add, I think that what we'll have you do, similar to what Marty mentioned, is a multi-pronged approach. So we'll have you start looking at grant application openings even by the end of this year. So you'll know what's coming out. So say by March or April, when you're further along down the path, you could potentially apply for something. There's also shorter term grants. One is what we've offered through LINC, the $10,000 grant. If at the end of the year you can show enough traction and you put your milestones out there, we would likely fund that. And then there's other, university grant money. There's business plan competitions that I've raised for one company. I raised about $80,000 by the end of a calendar year, just because you just go hit a couple different business plan competitions. So I hope that's another way you can raise money. And then the next step after that, but before the larger grants, is the kind of, they call them angels, which means it's typically like friends and family that maybe they can write a $25,000 check, knowing that it may not come back, but that's a whole other topic of how you want to take on the money and strategize, but just know that there's many different options, and including grants is good.
Foundations also fund research, but that's kind of more funding of like clinical research, so they'll fund clinical studies, but often only fund universities for the most part and nonprofits. So if you want to have your device in a clinical trial, you could work with like I guess UCSD or whoever and have foundation funding like from some cancer organization or whoever fund that as well. So.
We should
wrap
maybe I don't know if Marty can stick around for the break, otherwise I'm sure you can
Yeah, I'll
shoot him an email or
I'll stick around for the next